Greetings, History 393 students. My name is Daniel Joseph Clark, and this is my presentation on the California Gold Rush and its environmental impacts. Just a brief background on the Gold Rush. The Gold Rush started January 24th, 1848, after James Wilson Marshall, a carpenter at Sutter's Mill, noticed sparkling pebbles in along the American River. Um, After sort of taking those little pebbles and smashing them and finding little gold gleams of gold inside, they realized that this is actual gold. And so the news that gold had been discovered on the South Fork of the American River spread like wildfire, causing an influx of prospective gold miners into the San Francisco area and even surrounding areas. This sort of gave rise to the name of the 49ers, and better yet, known as the American football team, the San Francisco uh, 49ers. Some statistical figures at this time, which are fairly remarkable, is that by the end of 1849, so this is a year after the start of the gold rush, the non-native population was around 100,000. Now, I know that's not a crazy number, but consider the population as it was a year prior. So even before the gold rush started, it was a meager 1,000 people. That's a pretty incredible jump, especially within a year. Um, and so what's to be gleaned from this, what's to be understood from this, is that the gold rush sort of spiked the sort of economic milieu, the atmosphere of California, and even the states in general. And so that's something to keep in mind. That there's a huge amount of monetary success that came from this. However, even in spite of all the success that came, there are some huge side effects that accompanied the gold rush, and some of those being the environmental hazards that came with it. Now, it must be mentioned that at first, sort of the gold rush, gold mining was a sort of the image that we have in our minds is the guy carrying a little pan around, searching through the river, sifting through all the the little sand and rocks at the bottom, the bedrock, and sifting through to see if there's any little pebbles of gold. However, uh, these guys began to take this very seriously. The gold rush became a huge enterprise to where it became an industry in and of itself. One way of doing this was sort of the methods of mining that they adopted, one of them being the hydraulic mining, which is the process by which a bank of gold-bearing earth and rock is excavated from a jet of water, charged through the converging nozzle of a pipe under great pressure, the earth and debris being carried away by the same water through sluices and discharged on lower levels into the natural streams and watercourses below. So sort of envisage a giant hose, a high pressure hose, which could decimate a house or something if pointed at it, sort of tearing into a mountainside, sort of ripping apart the earth to get into the nooks and cranny of the bedrock in order to unearth um, the gold that lied there. And sadly, there were some huge side effects, some huge consequences to this sort of mining tactic. Just the overall destruction of the natural landscape. If you even look to the picture on my right, you'll see that um, there's obviously some teared up surface, um, a lot of destruction due to all that water. Also, one of them was sort of the rerouting of rivers that were needed in order to supply water for hydraulic mining. Remember that hydraulic mining is primarily water. It's water propelled through a small nozzle, high pressured water. And so these miners would have to reroute rivers using reservoirs and aqueducts in order to supply um, this process. Um, and one thing that is often overlooked, I think, is the flooding and the mudslides that occurred. Um, Again, this goes back to the water use. Tons and tons and tons upon tons of water is being um, sprayed and shot towards the earth. However, there's a steady stream of water that runs down, a backwash, so to speak, that carries debris, trees, bedrock, chunks of rock um, downstream. And this could be dangerous to, surrounding settlements because um, this is not just sort of just a flow of water, but more or less a flow of water with a bunch of chunks in it slamming into people's homes and settlements and um, whatever might be in its way. So all of this, there were pros to it, of course, the gold rush, but there are also some serious cons to it, and one of them being the environmental hazards. Um, However, now there's a sort of Christian appraisal that needs to be taken place in light of the gold rush. What's the Christian perspective to hold? Um, was what these miners are doing strictly bad and forbidden by the scriptures? I don't think so. I take a more nuanced approach. I think they were at some level justified in what they did, but also some level unjustified in what they did. Um, the scriptures, they give man complete dominion over creation. That's in the beginning, Genesis 2:15, where Adam is sort of given commission or is commissioned um, with order over all of the creation and the animals and Eden. However, this dominion is not to be understood as one of a conqueror, one of I'm in charge and therefore I can destroy you kind of mentality, but more or less a shepherd or a steward, one that takes care of, cultivates, works the ground, tills the ground in order to cultivate a new harvest and things like that. So in that sense, man is over creation. However, to sort of exploit God's creation for monetary gain and not to care anything of it is, I think, a wrong approach. Now, granted, yeah, I'm sure there was that going on in the gold rush, but I'm sure that there were also some, wholesome tactics to finding gold and to sort of gleaning from the land the gold that was there and making a profit, making a living off of it. Um, One sober view is portrayed by Francis Schaeffer. He's a Christian apologist. Highly recommend reading him. He says the Christian is called upon to exhibit this dominion, but exhibit it rightly, treating the things that as having value in itself, exercise dominion without being distractive. So in that case, I think there's a sober view to take. Not to mention that even in Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaimed his handiwork. This sort of view of creation as a picture, as a sort of picture of God's handiwork, his crafting, is a witness to the universe. It's a witness to the world of God's redemptive work on the cross. And so we should, as Christians at least, take stock in that belief and exercise prudence when we are, considering shaming and harming our environment. So there's a sort of wholesome ecology that can be acquired in all of this and understood. And that ends my presentation. Here are some references that I used. I thank you for your time, and I apologize if I was at all redundant in what I was saying. This wasn't very well rehearsed, so forgive me.